You know, when looking back at what some of the founding fathers had introduced here in America, and when you look back at a time period where most surrounding nations typically had kings and kingdoms, and there was a hierarchy very similar to what we have now, but many of those people who were put in position, or who I should say, taken positions of authority, especially when you look at in Europe in the olden times, like in the 16, 1700s, it was primarily revolving around kings and princes. This is very similar to what we have today, right? When you look at Europe, you still see like the old remnants of what was a dying way of ruling. And it was in that environment that the Declaration of Independence, where they had penned these words, and it says, because the king derived his power from religious authorities, and they would say, well, this person has, right to rule because God gave them the right to rule. And so the fathers back then had come to the realization that obviously that was all rhetoric. It was just useful manipulation against the people. And so their internal belief was, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And so that no one could say, I am above you because I'm endowed by our Creator to rule over you. That wasn't what they believed. And so that's what led to a war that happened way back when. And so they went on to state that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It says, to secure these rights, it says, governments are instituted among men. And it's important to understand the wording that is utilized is that this is what we hold as our beliefs, that the Creator has endowed all mankind with these rights. Life, you have the right to live, you have the right to freedom, and you have the right to pursue that which makes you happy. And so that's what it says, the pursuit of happiness. You are not guaranteed happiness, but you are guaranteed the right to pursue things that would make you happy. And of course, freedom. And it says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So we take from society who hold these beliefs and we say, you are a government, right? You represent us. And this is your responsibility. And that's basically what the wording is there. It says deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, right? So you take this huge population. This is what we hold evident. We are free. We are a people who are free by our Creator. We are a people who have the right to live, and we have the right to pursue the things that make us happy. We take individuals from that group and we say, you are representative of our government, which is why it goes on to state that they derive their power from the consent of the governed, right? So the reason that these people have authority is because we say you have authority to represent us. And so he goes on to say that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these, it is destructive of what? Destructive of the right, the unalienable rights. So when a government, any form within the government that we've established, if these people start to act like those people overseas who were kings over us, right? Then it says it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute a new government, so that the people, the governed, have the authority to, in essence, destroy or to fix. If it's salvageable, then we salvage it. If it's not salvageable, then we abolish it. And it goes on to say, laying its foundation on such principles and organizations, its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to the effect their safety and happiness. So it is the governed governs those who are governed. It is their responsibility to keep this in mind, that this is your responsibility. Now, of course, over time, very much like Jesus had said, that those who are put in positions of authority, the tendency is to lord it over. That's where we get that phrase, to lord it over, right? That phrase is from the Bible. It's what Jesus said, that those, and he said, of course, you don't be that way, right? He said, that's why he took take the position of a slave, because you are, that's why we call it public service. And Jesus said the tendency is for people to forget that they are servants and to act like lords. And the Declaration of Independence and the Founding Fathers understood that, because that was most people back then in Europe were some form of Christian. And so obviously that mindset, those teachings were pervasive, right? They were well established within most people. That's why a lot of people today, they'll quote certain phrases like the truth will set you free, right? A lot of people are familiar with that phrase, but they may not be familiar with who was the person who said it, right? Or the truth shall set you free. That is typically what a lot of people are. Those phrases are typically, many of them are familiar. Like, for example, iron sharpens iron. That's another one that people are quite familiar with, but they don't remember that where it came from. A lot of these phrases and terms, they come from the scriptures, from the way that people used to live way back when. And so it is our responsibility and our right as the governed to, as it states here, it is the right of those to alter or to abolish. But when those who are in positions of authority do not want to give up their authority, then the only answer is violence. And a lot of people have forgotten that. And it's primarily because men have taken a backseat role in society. You still do have men in certain positions, but overall within society, right? And this is the whole point of why they do this, is so that men don't fight back, which is why you see the attack on masculinity, telling women you don't need no man, etc., pushing men out of the home, the utilization of the welfare state, which is to extract resources primarily from men, and as well as, for example, child support, marital support. These are all tools that are used by the state for the purpose of extracting resources from men. And so when you have a society that is primarily built on, in essence, the abolition of the need for men, they say, well, we need you anymore. These are peace times. We don't need soldiers, etc. Until you do, and then you're like, oh, shoot, where's the militia? Where's the army, right? Where are the men right now who are willing to take up arms? This is why, do you think that these men that pen these words would have heard 2 weeks to slow the spread and would have complied? Of course not. These men would have been ready to go to war. They were ready to go to war over 1% tax. What was it? 1, 2, 3% tax that England wanted to impose on America back then. And they were like, fuck your tea. And they threw that shit in the water. And they were like, you know what? It's time to go to war. Everybody get ready to shoulder your rifle because we're going to war. These men would not have put up with that, with what's going on now. Could you imagine them putting up with mandatory forced medications? Of course not. This would not have, bodies would have dropped a long time ago. And this is why I say that you cannot vote your way out of tyranny. You have to remember what the founding fathers instituted, your right and your responsibility as a man to shoulder your rifle and to be willing and ready to go to war when necessary, especially when it comes to those who you state are to represent you and then they don't. The Declaration of Independence, we declare ourselves independent. We have declared that we hold these truths to be self-evident. They don't need anyone to sit there and prove them. They are self-evident that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their creator with rights that the government cannot take away because the government doesn't give it to you. And so when the government tries to pretend that they have given it to you, it is your responsibility as a man to shoulder your rifle and to be ready to go to war for your freedom, for the rights that God has given you. It is not your responsibility to give up those rights because they are endowed by your Creator. Now, some people do. Some people choose to live as slaves, and that is their choice. But when people try to force you into indentured servitude, and this has been going on in America, for longer than I've been alive, and it's just because of the monetary system. The monetary system is a form of debt servitude. And the only way that this goes away is by war. And of course, a lot of people are just not willing to put themselves on the line. Most people will not be willing to go to war or to fight for themselves, for their freedom, until it's their only choice. But these men were not like that. They were very different. They valued their freedom. It took a lot for them to get that freedom. And so they weren't very quickly willing to throw it away, even under coercion or the loss of life. They would rather die than give away their freedom, right? Their liberty. That's why the saying is, give me liberty or give me death, right? Because people were not willing to give up their life, their ability to be free, unless you were going to take it from them. And so with that said, it's funny just listening to some of these people talk about Boston just unveils just together, right? Togetherness. And this is their initiative. Oh, and there's a couple of videos that we're going to go through. And I want you to imagine, do you think in this time, do you think the men of this time would let stuff like this happen?
Today we're announcing that Boston will be implementing a requirement for proof of COVID-19 vaccination for certain indoor spaces, which we're calling our Be Together initiative. Be Together will require proof of vaccination to enter indoor dining. Well, three categories, just so you can keep the count. First, indoor dining, including bars and restaurants. Secondly, indoor fitness venues, such as gyms. And third, indoor entertainment, recreational, and event venues, such as theater shows or sports games. Starting January 15th, customers or patrons ages 12 and up and employees at these locations will be required to show proof that they've received at least one dose of the vaccine, and this will phase into requiring 2 doses on February 15th. We're also setting dates for children to be vaccinated to enter these spaces beginning in March.
And so this is basically what's happening in our time, where you have governments that are issued by the people, right? They derive their powers from the consent of the governed, that are now lording it over the people. And we're seeing the fruition of what the founding fathers had fought to avoid. We saw that also within World War I and within World War II, with pushing back against communism. Now, of course, the outcome of those wars may be different than what many of us have been taught. But going back to what the founding fathers had wanted was for individuals to be willing to fight and die for their freedom. And so you could never get away with stuff like this in this time period. And it's primarily because the culture of the men have changed so much. That's why you see a lot of TV shows that talk down upon men. They make fun of men, or they put roles that were typically very masculine, right? You look at old school like G.I. Joe, He-Man, James Bond. You look at many of these movies and shows that, I mean, from my youth on, I remember many of these. You look at stuff like He-Man, and a lot of the cartoons were designed to push masculinity, to push responsibility within many young people. And of course, when you look at some of the older TV shows, many of them were similarly like that. And of course, nowadays you see a complete 180. You see roles that were typically, hyper masculine that are now given to women, showing women we're strong, we're independent, etc. And it's for the purpose of this. It makes it easier to govern over these people. It makes it easier to lord it over them because the men become emasculated, and women by nature aren't going to shoulder their rifles. Perfect example is look what happened in Afghanistan, right? People were sitting here, they're pushing feminism in Afghanistan, and you have all these women on, in the West that are role playing as, we're strong, we're independent, right? We can do everything a man can do. And then the Afghan men come in, take over, and say, you've lost all your rights. We're going back to the way things were, and not a single woman shouldered her rifle. They just went right back to the way things were. Maybe they didn't like it. They were more appreciative of feminism and that whole nature, but none of them were willing to put their lives on the line. It's just not natural for them to do that. And so for men in America thinking that this is something that we can't do, imagining that women are going to fight back, it's just not going to happen. It's just all mental slavery. It's just all mental slavery that many of us have been subjected to. And now we are at the end times of the fruition of what the founding fathers did not want, what they warned about. And many people, just like biblical times, you go through these good times and then the nation would go right back into slavery, right? They had it too good for too long. And then they would forget where they came from, in essence, right? Just like we have. We have forgotten the men from which we came, the men who were willing to shoulder their rifle and go to war when necessary, when the governments were getting out of hand, when they were forgetting that they were representative of the people, representative of the governed. It is, as they went on to say, it is your right of the people to both alter and to abolish and to institute a new government. It's completely okay. But what do they call it here? They call it sedition, right? They'll say, oh, you're committing an act of sedition. Right? It's treason. But yet the founding fathers recognized that that was both not only your right, but also your responsibility to do within your own government. That when your government started to act out of pocket, as they say, you say you're fired. And if they didn't want to go peacefully, well, then there was other ways of dealing with it that were more violent. And that's not that we want to become violent, but as men, we recognize that violence is always there underlining. The underlining relationships between men is always one where violence can break out. And so as a result, we try to do things peacefully because we know that we will become violent and we'll use violence to solve issues where people want to impose their will upon us. Now, with that said, even places like Japan, says Japanese government tells citizens do not discriminate against these people, right? It goes on to state where they say, it says, despite numerous major countries making this mandatory, it says the Japanese government told its citizens do not discriminate against those individuals. And it's amazing where we're seeing certain countries are not with the agenda of what's going on. And it's primarily we're not seeing any real pushback in the West, in the land of the free and the home of the brave. And Americans, primarily the American men, need to be willing to step up. For the country to be fixed, the American men have to be willing to go to war. You have to be willing to put your life on the line. But typically it doesn't happen, like I said, until it's life or death. It's not that these people value freedom. It's just that I'm going to die anyway, so I might as well fight. Now, in Austria, this is new. It says due to compulsory laws, right, being enacted by February, it says Austria is looking for employees who hunt down those who refuse. And so what they want to do is they want to take people from like the normal people. This is what happens when I talk about the police. This is why the founding fathers, they didn't have, a police force over them. Everybody was responsible for taking care. You were responsible as a man for taking care of your family. You had to shoulder your own rifle. You did not abdicate that authority to somebody else because this is what happens. This is why they did not want that. This is why they pushed against that. And they said that you have the right to bear arms. It is your responsibility to have a well-regulated militia so that just in case these people go rogue, we're adequately trained to put such individuals down who do not uphold the Constitution. And so that's why I say it is both your right and your responsibility that when these people do things that are unconstitutional, to act as a whole and to say that you no longer have authority. And if they refuse, then it's your responsibility for the utilization of force, because it is what the founding fathers had instituted for our safety, so that what is going on, what you see in other countries, doesn't happen here. Like in my video that I showed yesterday, the people that are going to come and knock on your door, knock on your business, fine you, arrest you, it's not going to be a politician. It's going to be these people right here. They're going to become in uniform. And so there's always the back the blue and support these individuals, right? We're here to serve and protect. And so and whenever things really get bad, when things start to quiet down, they're like, oh, go out there and do some PR. Go out there and do some PR. So we're going to do some handouts, right? And it's for the purpose of changing your mind that your overseers are good. And so it stops you from wanting to fight back. It stops you from looking at these people as your enemy, when in fact they are. And it's not that you're looking at them on an individual basis, but collectively, they are the enemy of the people, because they support those who refuse to be abolished or to be altered. These are the people that they put in front of them, right? These, in essence, have become their military. They utilize these individuals to fight the governed. They use these people to fight the government. They don't want to give up their power. They don't want to give up the power that they have been given by the governed. And so they take people from among them and they say, you will protect us. And then you are to say to the people, you are not allowed to bear arms. And this eventually has to go away. And it's the responsibility of the men to shoulder their rifle and to fight back collectively as a whole. That's going to be very difficult. We don't live in a time period where we have strong men. It's the good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. Hard times create strong men. And so we'll have to go through some hard times. But the reality is that eventually, when many of the weak men die, strong men will be forced to do what is necessary. That's why when you look back at time periods where they had, oh my God, I'm forgetting the name of it, where you cannot forcefully, the Nuremberg Code, they put these people to death, and they put them to death publicly. You can look back, do a little research. They were literally hanging these people in the square. This was not even 100 years ago. And it was like pictures of all these people that they hung openly. And it was at a time period where strong men were forced to rise. And it's just the season. We are in the season. It's wintertime, right? And during the wintertime, people might not like it. But eventually you get the spring and the summer. And unfortunately, we're in the fall going into the wintertime. And eventually strong men will rise. But there are going to be some very bad times ahead of us. Now, depending upon how bad the times get, we could see stuff like this. Swedish startup Epicenter unveils a rice-sized microchip implant that stores this right here. Right? It stores this right here under your skin and is read with technology used to take contactless payments. Right, and this is actually, I think it's from yesterday. This is from December 20th, 2021. And so it's not that this stuff is new. It's not that these chips are new. It's just another thing to weaponize against the people. They've been waiting to utilize this stuff. And so people will say, they've been using these chips for a while. And it's like, yeah, they've been waiting to use them. And this stuff doesn't happen, all at once. It's not that you wake up the next day and all your rights are gone. It just happens incrementally. These people know human behavior, and we're going to talk about that in a second with a video by de Blasio. And so this is what happens in certain countries. And if it's successful over here, right? If it's useful in Sweden, maybe Austria will adopt it, maybe Germany will adopt it, maybe Canada will adopt it, and we'll start to see renditions of it. We'll start to see it gets acclimated towards the society where it's useful, right? Just like in Australia, right? They got the camps out over there. They're building camps over here in Canada. And so people are like, well, if the people don't push back, well, maybe we can build them a little bigger. We'll build them a little bigger. We'll build them a little bigger. I can get a little pushback and we'll slow down, because it becomes the people become acclimate, right? The little frog, like we used to learn, the frog in the boiling water. It happens gradually. And so this is something else that is also interesting. This is the Pfizer CEO, and we're going to hear about this. A little video, a little clip talking about microchips and pills.
There's no guarantee that the patient is going to take the drug, wear the device. So how are you thinking about technology to engage the patient?
Yeah. Again, maybe I will use an example. I think it's fascinating what's happening in this field right now. I mean, FDA approved the first electronic pill, if I can call it like that. So it is basically...
And of course, you should not be surprised to see this stuff here, right? These people are the enemy of the people.
Biological chip that it is in the tablet. And once you take the tablet and dissolves into your stomach, sends a signal that you took the tablet. So imagine the applications of that, compliance. The insurance companies to know that the medicines that patients should take, they do take them. It is fascinating what happens in this field.
And so this is basically, see, when people are in positions of authority, this is the stuff that they scheme over. These are the things that they continue to go further because they don't want to abdicate their authority. They want to keep their authority. And so they look for more and more ways to rule over the governed and to suppress their ability to be free. And this is where there's another one that I want to play. There's another video here. I want to see if I can find it. That rebel capitalist had posted just the other day where de Blasio was on TV talking about, let me see if I can find this right here.
Part of the country with you, I don't think we'd see masks. People want to lead their lives. I mean, the hard thing, I feel it here in New York City. By the way, I'm from Philadelphia, so it's not like I live in a rural area. But I feel it in every block that I walk in New York City. But if I were in the middle part of the country with you, I don't think we'd see masks. I don't think we'd be showing our vax cards anywhere. So I come back to that point where unless everybody's on the same page in the country, we're kind of screwed.
And you know how you get on the same page? People have to lead. So, look, I believe with enough leadership, enough mandates, we're going to get a hell of a lot more people vaccinated. The more people vaccinated, the more we actually make the transition to a time when COVID is in the background, not the foreground. And we know these mandates work, and we know people respond. Look, human beings are pretty predictable. If you say your paycheck depends on it, or your ability to enjoy life and go do the things you want to do, people will make the...
And so, as you can see, these people feel completely okay, right? They're completely comfortable with talking about this stuff openly. They're out of line with the underlying values that exist in the foundation of what America is. That you have these unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And you hear in the discussion that they're having that the other guy, the reporter, that he's there, he's like, you go into New York and everybody's got, their slave muzzle on. But then you go into these other states and it's like there's absolutely nothing going on. He's like, how do we get these people to comply? And he says, basically we have to force them. And then you see where they talk about they study human behavior and they utilize human behavior and they utilize it to their advantage. They openly, as you can see, openly admits it on TV. And so what we have to do is we have to manipulate their behavior, right? We have to take away their ability to feed their family and to be able to keep a roof over their head. And so when you apply enough pressure, the people will fold. These men would not have tolerated this. These men would have been ready to go to war a long time ago. And so the appeal is always towards American men. What are you going to do? Because it's coming for you. I know some people, I'm safe here in Florida. I'm okay here in Texas, or maybe you're in some other state. This is your future. This is going to be your future. And what are you going to do about it when the time comes? again, there were no, 1776, come and get it, when they said 2 weeks to slow the spread. And so from 2 weeks to slow the spread to microchips in your arms to we need the ability to take away your livelihood, and we need the ability to take away your ability to pursue things that make you happy. This is where we're at. And what are the men going to do? It is your right and your responsibility. It is the right of the people to both alter and to abolish, and to institute a new government laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such a form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. It is your responsibility to uphold what the founding fathers had instituted. It is completely up to the men what they choose to do. Eventually, it will happen in the straits of the time. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. This video is a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. But I'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening.